How's it going, folks? This is Mike, and I'm here to do the episode 4 of Genre Files, and this time we're doing biopics. And I apologize for being almost a week late, but better late than never, right? I hope. Anyway, so the film I've chosen from 1959, Columbia Pictures, this is the GENE KRUPA story. GENE KRUPA. GENE KRUPA was a legendary jazz drummer. He started his career in 1927 and one of the most popular musicians during the big band era. And he lived until 1973. He passed away at the age of 64. And in this story, he's played by Sal Mineo, who was one of the most popular actors of the 1950s. Sal Mineo became a star overnight in Rebel Without a Cause. 1955, he made the film when he was only 15 years old and was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. So by 1959, he was trying to kind of live down his reputation as the Switchblade Kid, which is what they called him. He had played a series of troubled teenagers, right, who got involved in gangs and had all kinds of dramatic things happening to him. And he was trying to play a more adult role. He was very good in this movie. So the story is GENE KRUPA started out in Chicago, the son of immigrants, very poor immigrants, and he wanted to be a musician. His parents, their dream for their youngest son, Eugene, was that he would enter the priesthood. But he defied his father, and he decided to go ahead and try to be a musician. Well, when his father dies unexpectedly, Eugene is so guilty that as an act of penance almost, he decides to enter the priesthood and tries it for a year and then drops out because he realizes that what he really wants to do is be a drummer. So along with his best friend Eddie, who was a trumpet player, played by James Darren, who also sings in the film, and his beautiful girlfriend, played by Susan Kohner, her name is Ethel, they go to New York and they struggle for a long time until they start to find success. Eddie as a trumpet player and Eugene as a drummer. And he gets a lot of attention from people like Tommy Dorsey, and starts to work his way up and becomes incredibly successful. And also for a while he works for Benny Goodman, and then eventually gets his own band. And like a lot of successful people in show business, he starts making bad decisions. He gets very arrogant. He's throwing money all over the place, living the party life and all that crazy stuff. And eventually he loses his beautiful, sweet girlfriend because he gets involved with a blonde bombshell bad girl played by Susan Oliver, who also introduces him to marijuana. Well, when he starts using marijuana, he gets psychologically addicted to it, and it throws off his timing as a musician. It starts to cause him a lot of problems. And eventually he is arrested for possession, and he spends some time in jail. Now, when he gets out of jail, GENE KRUPA is blacklisted, and everybody's afraid to hire him. That's a very serious thing back in those days. He really starts to struggle. He works in low-down dives under assumed names, moving from place to place, works in strip joints, and is always tempted to go back to using drugs again, but he doesn't. And he eventually starts getting more chances, and his friends start, believing in him and trying to support him. And I think in the story, and I don't know if this is the way in real life, but in the story, he gets another chance by Tommy Dorsey, who was played by Bobby Troup in the film, to do a specialty number during one of Tommy Dorsey's engagements. And at first he's booed by the audience as he drops his drumsticks, and it looks like he's just going to, fail. But the old talent comes back, the old drive comes back, and he is a smashing success. And after that, he's back on top again. So GENE KRUPA, his story, eventually gets his girlfriend back, and the film ends beautifully on a very positive note. And GENE KRUPA really did turn his life around. Now, in real life, GENE KRUPA married Ethel. They were married for a few years. They got divorced, and then they found their way back to each other, and they got married again and stayed married for life, which is also a very nice thing. So, in a way, this film follows kind of a common Hollywood biopic trajectory, where somebody starts out with very humble beginnings and then struggles to get to the top, and then they plunge to the bottom, and then in most of these films, they end up rising back to the top again. It doesn't always end that well. Some of them die. But in this case, it ended well. So Sal Mineo gave a very, very good performance. Now, Sal Mineo, after this performance, the following year, he worked in a film called Exodus, where he gave a really good performance and was once again nominated for Best Supporting Actor, as he had been in Rebel Without a Cause. But after that, as the 60s went on, Sal Mineo really started to struggle, and he didn't seem to be growing into a more adult image. And he was always, the beautiful, soulful-eyed young boy that couldn't really get away from being the Switchblade Kid. His last film was made in 1971. It was Escape from the Planet of the Apes. And after that, he worked a lot in television, and eventually, in the 70s, he started finding his own directions as a Broadway performer and director. And unfortunately, he was killed. He was murdered at the age of 37 in 1976. Very, very sad that we lost him so young. Very talented actor. Now, James Darren was also another Italian-American actor with the dark, good looks and the ducktail haircut. And he too was kind of trapped in that image of always being kind of a teenager type, right? Never really grew out of it, although he was a very good actor, as well as being a very good singer. The same year that he did this film, he made another film called Gidget with Sandra Dee, and he became kind of typecast as Gidget's boyfriend, which he did in 2 following films. And he made several films, did a lot of television, and also he probably had more success on television. He did two series. One was Time Tunnel in the 60s, and then later on in the 70s he was in T.J. Hooker along with William Shatner. And eventually he became a director, and he will be forever known to Star Trek fans for his performance in Deep Space Nine. He did several episodes as a holographic lounge singer named Vic Fontaine. Still very much with us, still performing, still comes to Star Trek conventions, and a very cool guy. Now, Susan Kohner was a very hot actress of the period. She was actually 3 years older than Sal Mineo, but they worked together twice. They worked together in 1957 in a film called Dino, one of Sal Mineo's classic juvenile delinquent performances, and she played his girlfriend in that. And then 2 years later, they did this film together. The same year that she made this film, she was in a very successful movie called Imitation of Life, where she played a young, light-skinned black girl who was trying to pass for white. She won a Golden Globe Award as Best Supporting Actress and was nominated for Best Supporting Oscar, and went on to make several films, did quite a bit of television, and then gave it all up in 1964 for marriage and motherhood. Okay? Now, interesting thing about Susan Kohner, for a nice piece of trivia, and this will probably mean something to all of my friends who were into the Universal classic films from the 1930s. Her mother is a beautiful Mexican-American actress named Lupita Tovar, who was the female lead in the 1931 Mexican version of Dracula, which was filmed in 1930 at Universal Studios. At the same time they were making the English language version with Bela Lugosi during the day, they were making the Mexican version at night. And she starred in that film. Beautiful woman. Now, the interesting part is that Lupita Tovar is still alive. I think she is nearly 105 years old. I checked yesterday to make sure, because if you can trust Wikipedia, I knew that she was up into her hundreds, but I wanted to make sure that she hadn't passed away. But that makes her probably the last living person to have any connection with those original Dracula films made in 1930. So Susan Oliver, of course, will always be known to Star Trek fans as Vina, the girl, the character in the first Star Trek pilot, The Cage, which later became known as the Menagerie. And as far as there's another actress in the film, another cult kind of an actress named Yvonne Craig, who was very popular at the time, playing sexy young chicks, and she later on became known as Batgirl on TV. So there were some real life jazz legends played in this film. We had Red Nichols, Buddy Lester, and also Anita O'Day, a great jazz singer. She actually sings in this film in a party scene. Anita O'Day once sang with GENE KRUPA's band, and it was wonderful to hear her. She's just a great, great singer. And I guess that's pretty much all I want to say. It's filmed in black and white. Definitely worth a look. There goes the clock. It's 5 o'clock. So that is my Genre Files movie for Biopics. And if you would like to make a comment, please do. Thanks a lot.